This podcast is brought to you by Penji. Penji is a creative subscription service that gives you access to pre-vetted, agency-trained creatives from all over the world. From graphic design to illustrations to social media management and web development, it's all included for one monthly price. It's time to say goodbye to the hassle of searching for top-notch creative talent. With Penji, you get quality and consistency delivered right to your inbox every day, carefully crafted for you by humans. So meet your new creative team today. Head over to penji.co for more and enter the coupon code located within the podcast show notes.
Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Fully Managed podcast. Call, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you. So today we're going to start with a game. As usual, this one I think is very fun. I think that you'll really like it because of the background that you have. So this is called Human or Machine. So I'm going to give you a bunch of scenarios, and you are going to guess whether a human created this idea or a machine did, or AI or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Okay,
Sound
let's
fun?
do it. Yeah.
Alrighty, it's okay. We'll have your answers at the end, and then we'll grade you. No, it's but yeah, I just hope that's fun. And no, there's no quizzing here. Okay, so I know I promised you no quizzing, and now I'm quizzing you, but
No, it's totally fine. Also, like, I know how impossible those games are, so I'm ready to lose.
It's really actually like the last person I quizzed got most of them right, and I was actually disappointed. I was like, oh no. I was like, maybe I didn't make these hard enough. Okay.
Let's go.
Alrighty. Okay. A logo that morphs based on local weather patterns.
Human.
Yeah. This was a concept behind the rebrand for a Brazilian climate data platform. So that is human. Okay. A luxury vodka brand named Obsidian Echo with packaging that visually responds to music. I thought this was really cool. These are all real things, but and it would be crazy. I couldn't really test you if they were all not real. So
Machine.
that is machine. This came from a multi-model AI branding sprint using DALL-E, ChatGPT, and Runway. It is human curated, obviously, but
Yeah.
it is a brand asset that was AI generated. Okay, next one. A perfume brand called I Am Trash, made from recycled fruit waste.
I mean, it's one of those things that, like, the less governed AIs would totally come up with. So yeah, I'll go machine.
It's actually human.
Okay.
I do love those though, because I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it's just like, basically that's what grok is. It's like, oh, we put some guardrails down and now this is the kind of ideas it comes up with. And it's like, everyone's like, oh, it's so human. It pierces. Great.
I love the absurdity of it sometimes, because sometimes I'm like, only a human could think of something so absurd, but then you're like, no.
Yeah.
Because AI has that same energy sometimes, because it's so random sometimes that a human couldn't even think of it. But it's so weird because you can't really tell which way it's coming from.
Yeah, it's all there in the vector space. You just have to point in the right direction.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I'm trying to decide which one should be your last one. Okay. This is actually perfectly on topic for what we were just discussing. Okay. A toothpaste brand inspired by vaporwave aesthetics named Glorp.
Okay, human.
This is a machine.
Okay, switch, but yeah, same energy. It's the same place,
get
it's
it.
the same address.
Because it's so bizarre that you're like, is this so bizarre because it's AI
Yes.
generated, or is it human because we have crazy imaginations?
Okay, great.
Alrighty, well, I think you did great. I think that's impossible to win this game. I would think you were AI if you got them all right anyway. So I think
No, it speaks about something that I think about a lot, like in terms of like we we're so busy making machines like humanoids, then like of course like what it's like basically the whole like business of AI is now just like trying to imitate humans. So like
Mhm.
that includes that. So I guess like those kind of tests are very useful to see how good they are at this specific task, even though they might have better tasks to deal with.
Yeah, it is funny. It's a funny, I guess, dichotomy of the idea that we could maybe waste less time trying to make something more human and just use humans in the process. But at the same time, I think everyone's working towards that goal of once we get this so human, we don't have to, I guess, waste resources doing these things, and we can use this human-like entity to do the things in which we're looking for. And it's just very funny. The road to this goal is a very funny one.
Yeah, totally.
So speaking of this kind of internal debate in our world, I see a lot of like humans versus AI. You make a really good case of like the importance of humans being in the loop. What do you think people get the most wrong about generative design? And what do you think like there are misunderstandings of often?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that the most interesting part about generative design, or like what people get wrong about it, is basically what station or what time they got on the train. Because when I joined Proto, for instance, and this wasn't long ago, this was like 3 years ago, right? Like 2022. Um, Proto was always interested in generative design, but generative design was just something else. Generative design was a name for parametric systems, right? Like design systems that are built around rules and are completely governable, yet they keep regenerating themselves. So, like instead of just like saying, "Well, this is our brand colors and this is where the logo is," then you just exactly like your example of the logo that is drawing data from weather data,
Mhm.
like, and inspired by it. Basically, this is a parametric system, right? Like it takes weather data and it has like parameters that can change according to that. Therefore, every day a different logo. That's what generative design was just like a minute ago. Basically, a script based rule system that lets you, instead of like, you know, engraving your logo into a rock and kind of saying, well, this is what it is until I have enough money to recreate it, it gives you something that has both rules and flexibility, that gives you an identity, but also an identity that changes. And I think that what happened is that generative took a different meaning in
Mm,
parallel. And now I think a lot of executives and a lot of marketers, people who are not necessarily like are really drawn to the tech, are confused between the two, because the people who like knew generative design when it was a rule system are very confused by diffusion models, for instance, right? Like what we call generative design right now. And I'm speaking now more about visual, but it's true to text in some way. It's just, again, like the way AI scrambled the generative game is like both fascinating and amazing, but I think also creates a lot of confusion and creates a lot of misunderstanding of like what the humans did all along.
mhm,
Because in the last iteration of generative design, when it was a rule-based system, there was still like craft in it that made people still believe like, oh, like even though now I'm getting maybe something that looks more like a website instead of getting design assets or a brand playbook, I still really understand why a designer is needed. Where now, when you're basically kind of prompting something and you get like, you get an immediate asset back, people get confused about the role of humans. Yet, um, they do the same thing. They translate purpose into asset. And
mhm,
the fact that, there's a meme, I don't know if you know it, of like, designers are safe from AI because like AI needs clients to say what they want exactly, and that's not
mhm.
going to happen. And I think
That's
that while
so
it's
true.
like a joke, it's also kind of true.
Mhm.
and and I think that there's like a lot of misunderstanding of what designers actually do, like how they read between the lines and how they, like look at what, good designers look beyond what you just ask them to do, or like how well you can how well a client can express themselves visually, and then translate this purpose to something that is that communicates purpose on scale. And the tools of generative A or generative B don't really change that, right? So I think that understanding how those systems work and what's the difference between the two can really help brands understand and like utilize those tools, find the right humans, and find the right system that like makes their brand more flexible, more communicative, more purpose driven, instead of just saying like, oh, we can cut that. It's not really gonna solve most of the problems.
Yeah, no, I definitely really like what you said about how like designers have this vision that a lot of clients do not have. Like they have lightly a vision, but they're either poor at explaining it or maybe they don't really know what they want at all. They just want something better than what they have or something more than what they have. And it's interesting because a lot of designers nowadays, I think I would say maybe almost all of them use a level of AI incorporated into their systems when they're doing design because it's just something that's very helpful at this point. It's not, I don't think at the point of replacing humans entirely in any way at all. It is developing, but I'm sure that they all include them and incorporate it into their work because it's just something that's extremely helpful. But I think that having someone who doesn't have a design brain, so to speak, instruct an AI tool to do something is not going to have as good of a result as if a designer is involved in it. And I think that's a really funny phenomenon that's happening right now. I even think of our service and the idea that you're working with humans that are designers, not any AI tool. But the best person to work with our designers is another designer because they're good at describing it to that person rather than someone who is maybe throwing like arbitrary terms out there or something that's like it's hard to understand their vision or they're so vague and then they realize that they don't like what's showing up. And I think that when creatives are in charge of these tools and the human is kept in the loop, so to speak, that you're going to have a better end result at this point in time. Like it's very difficult to oh, that actually goes into another point that you also made in your presentation about like taste is still human. And I was wondering if you could talk more on that because that's kind of what that made me think of.
Yeah, like it's a great way to put it. And I think that one thing this made me think of is like fashion, for instance, or how AI and generative AI makes it a little bit like clothing. I don't know anything about fashion, like, unfortunately. I wish I would, but I clothe myself every day, thankfully. Everyone clothes themselves every day. Yet, would I want to clothe myself for the Met Gala? No way. I don't want to dress myself at scale. And it's not because I don't know how to dress myself. I know how to dress myself. It's because I don't read as many cues of the clothing as a stylist does.
Hmm.
And I can't translate how my taste or like what I'm trying to convey will scale when like a million people look at it. And I think that's like, we say taste, okay, but taste, of course, taste is very human, and taste is also very subjective, and it can get into like so many different aspects of it where we can like, but let's maybe like unfold this term. Like there are few different parameters on like even what taste is. So taste also develops, right? You can not like something one day and like it the other day. How does that happen for marketing teams or for like brands? It happens in politics, actually. It happens when like a designer is good enough in like explaining what they do, that people are bought into it, and like then they see the message in it. So that's also a big misconception of like, what the designer works is like. The designers can only design something that they can sell as a vision, not in terms of like, it's not a dirty thing. It's not a matter of like, oh, sales or money or exchanges. It's about selling the vision forward. It's about driving people and like having influence. And if they're good, they're able to get people to see it. So like what? Their taste changed overnight. Like they saw the email, they saw the assets. Their first impression was like, I don't like it. Yet they have the meeting the next day. They come out of it super excited and they feel very comfortable in it. Did their taste change? I don't think so, but they believe in something now. They believe in a message. They believe in something that a designer did, which is basically, again, reading visual, or reading like a visual communication and reading into more clues than I think what the clients can. And when they see like all these clues, and when they see how it's like translate the purpose, they are bought into it. And now you can think about it as taste. Again, like just think about the psychological trajectory of prompting an AI and getting something back. You don't go through that. So if you got the email the day before with whatever it is that you generated, and you saw it, and that's the end of it, you might have missed on something amazing. You might have missed on something that like really does can do great for you, even just for like, trying, again, going back to the clothing part, just thinking about like trying something else out, and like like trying it on, walking outside your house with like a new outfit, and it's like you don't really know it, and you don't really know what it does until you like are sold on like that purpose, or like what it should do, or like how it is. And I think that's like a very big part of the again, the human in the loop. The idea that we can remove it is the idea that we like know what we want, and we can tell immediately, and that like we read all the cues. Then you don't need a stylist, you don't need the designer. Yeah, of course, like, but that's not how it is. It's all about communication. It was never about like, oh, like Figma skills, Photoshop skills, etc. Those are just like tools. They'll always shift.
Yeah, no, I really love that point, because I think that taste changing is something that's really heavily involved in liking a design or anything related to the design world. It's very interesting that so you can objectively look at something and say, that's a bad design. I don't like that. But I think that the way that someone spins it or communicates like why they did that or the purpose of it or whatever it may be is indicative of whether it's successful or not. It doesn't actually necessarily matter the skill set sometimes. It matters more that you're able to communicate them. I think that marketing in a way is very persuasive, obviously. And I think that you can create something that I've seen so many styles that are in my tastes ugly, but I like them for some reason. And like I know that I would never wear them, and I know that I don't understand them really, but the meaning behind them is something that I like. And I think it's all in the way that you spin it. And a something that is like an AI tool cannot really spin something for you. So you can look at something and objectively say, oh, well, I don't really like that. I don't understand the purpose or whatever it may be. But someone who maybe creates something that looks exactly like that can tell you, hey, this is why I made this for X, Y, and Z. And these are why it will work best for you to have it this way. And that's what might convince you to like it. And that's how tastes change. But a tool can't necessarily change your tastes.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to remember that best practices and rules generally, design rules or any other rules, are always made in retrospective. Like even if I take something from my background as a musician, like one of the most important things to learn, like if you're a composer, is four-part harmony, which is like all in the style of Bach. And like it's a very very expensive rule book of like like what exactly can you do when you're like harmonizing a four-part choral, right? And it's really hard to learn in a lot of ways, but Bach didn't have none of those rules. He just he just wrote a choral piece every week and heard what's going on, like when he writes A and B and C. He just had a purpose and a function, and he found the best design patterns to answer those problems that he was experiencing every day. It's the exact same with like how you work with type or how you work with color, etc. It always changes, and the best designers think about the function and sometimes completely ignore the best practices of the time because something else is better handling the function. The most interesting part is that AI is not really good at doing that, because AI is, again, all about averaging. And we already kind of covered that it's all there in the vector space, right? Including the like perfume called trash, etc. Like it's all someone there, but like you have to point at it, and it's really hard to point at it because you have to know what to point at. And if you know what to point at, okay, great, you call yourself a designer or not, you're a designer now, welcome to the club. Like it's just like that's the work. It's translating purpose into something that communicates at scale. um Everything else is like passing. And yeah, I don't think that designing by the rules and like best practices are a good measurement for that at all. Just because we actually, I think that clients really sometimes like they're trying to find good measurements for like the work that's done, so they can say like, oh, this is great by the rules or not great by the rules. But then they end up like disrupted by someone who didn't follow the rules, and they're just like, why didn't we do something like that? And it's like, oh yeah, because your system is really not receptive of something like that, because you're trying to like enforce something that gives you control. But that control is not part of what makes design successful.
Yeah, it's like thinking outside of the box. Like, so you want something to disrupt like the pattern of what's happening at that time, because that's what's going to make your brand stand out. And if you have those very set rules of what to create or how to create, then you might not get something that um you really want to be able to um what's the word I'm looking for? Like present in a crowded environment, like something, especially if your industry is something that's very oversaturated. That's something that you really need a very set vision in, or something that you need to think and explore very different innovative options in order to come up with something that you to stand out with all of the noise. And that's something that you can't necessarily do if you don't have the mindset of what you want it to become. And that it goes back to what we've been saying this whole time about how you need that human-centered approach. And someone with vision in order to dictate the outcome of like an AI tool,
Yeah.
whereas they can't just necessarily come up with that with themselves.
Yeah, and I think it's a good question of what generative systems change is that instead of like humans being literally the painter with the paintbrush, it's gonna be like the person saying, oh, like everything needs to be more red. They change the rule book instead of changing like the actual painting. But
Mhm.
changing the rule book is a lot more powerful, because if you have a rule book that is like successful and works for you and somehow like communicates what you're trying to communicate, then you also have like this beautiful flexible system that is not only right for one occasion, for one style, for like one thing, right? Like we have to, that's what I love so much about generative design in both sides of it, the AI and the parametric design or procedural design, is that it's actually very humane, even though it's like very algorithmic. It gives you the flexibility to like again, like wear a button down shirt one day and wear a t-shirt the other. And clothing is a great example also of parametric design, because there is like some sort of like a set that we know, like, oh, these things are needed, these things work together, yet it's also there's endless possibilities within it. So I think thinking like that as a brand gives you a lot of grounds you in the right side of your purpose and gives you a lot of flexibility to change slightly when you want to.
Yeah, I think that it gives you this opportunity to experiment more because it's not taking nearly as much time to reorient yourself constantly. I think that
Yeah.
that's something that is incredible about AI, especially for design, is the idea that, of course, like making something completely different took so much more before, where now you can see something that's reflective of at least something that you're envisioning is entirely different than what your first maybe set vision was or what you had in mind. And being able to see like, oh, do I like this better? And now you have the opportunity to do that more and kind of be more flexible with those options rather than before where it might just take too much time that you can't see like what the better options are or what could be better than what you're looking at now.
Yeah, totally. And generally, I think it's just really important for people to like have a scrappy experimentation practice like somewhere in their organizations. Usually, it's just a very good investment, because it's it makes sense that you wouldn't want the issues of compliance, like dealing now with like generative AI, for instance, on like brand level for a lot of different customers. For some clients, like it wouldn't matter because they're small, they're scrappy, they can do whatever they want. But for big brands, like this is too much of a risk. And yet there's a lot of places internally where they can like leverage these systems heavily, and like understanding them can be like an incredible resource. And I don't think it's just about like moving fast or etc., which I think like people keep thinking about it in terms of optimization. I think it's also just observing a completely foreign practice that you didn't have access to before. And I think one of the biggest values that it has is that when you think about like how it actually works, then you think about the ability to validate also what you think you know, because AI is very good at giving you the exact median perception of a term, of an image, of a message. And that's very useful for brands, because sometimes they think they communicate something very clearly, and they think that they know exactly how it like catches this middle ground, but it's not necessarily true.
Yeah, I think that's really important to know because I I think that there's a learning element of using tools that I think is really helpful because it helps you get out of your brain, like your mindset of some people are very set on something when they, especially if they're the owner of a brand. I think that's something that's so difficult to get out of because you've created something that's very curated and you might view as perfect. But when you have another element involved, then it's kind of like getting a different perspective. Of course, obviously it is not a human being, but it is still something that's helpful to get more feedback, like questioning what you do, but also exactly what you said, like validating what you already know, like something is already good the way it is. And that's incredibly helpful, especially when you don't have the resources or maybe the money to put towards something that would, or maybe a physical person that would be able to give you that kind of feedback.
Yeah, I think that's a common like tip that I find that when I work sometimes with clients, like it's we at Proto, a lot of the times we sort of make sure that we use AI in both sides of like, oh, like you want a generator. By the way, the generator is also a validator.
Mhm.
Like it knows what you're looking for, feed it back the things that your outcomes, and see if they stand out like in the same way that you think they are.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, because it's I think people are very confused by how generalized AI is. We didn't have a software that was as general use ever,
Mhm.
right? Like something that can really do everything, and that makes people use it in a very general way, which makes it the outcomes be very generic. Like and I'm not sure what else they expected. So the more you clarify the exact outcomes that you want to get from it and the exact ways that you want to use it, the better your use cases are gonna be. Like again, if you think about, it's kind of weird because like LLMs are not really like like Figma or Photoshop or like I don't know, like Excel or something like that. It's more like Python, like more, like almost everything you touch like has an element that uses Python. Like it's a programming language, but it's also user facing. And I think that's just like really, I don't know. It's creating this extreme confusion in like how to use this effectively. What is this thing? Like does this make everyone useless? Does this make everyone turbocharged? Like who's gonna steal your job? But in the end of the day, it didn't sell me even one thing ever. Not an idea. Not like I did. Sometimes I think it's right, but it doesn't make me believe in anything I did not believe before.
Mhm.
And people are much, much better at doing that. And especially when it comes to design, that's the whole job. There's nothing else. Like even the best designer who's like the most skillful, if they can't make you believe in their work, like it's useless.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the number one most important thing about it, because you can have, like, anyone can dislike or like something for very arbitrary reasons, not for any kind of evidential based like facts that this would work well in this scenario. I think a lot of people will are stuck in that brain because we all have our own biases, but like the selling on it is the point of kind of the scenario, and people very much miss the mark for that of um even understanding that sometimes. And if you are overly reliant on a tool and not necessarily training it kind of in the way in which you were mentioning of being more specific, and which is why it is probably more evident that we should have designers being the ones looking for designs, or someone that has a very curated vision on what they need and being able to describe it well. It only makes sense that that would be the best person to be involved in these tools, because they are going to be able to challenge what is generic, because they are well versed in the world.
Yeah,
um,
and they're reading. They're just reading more between the lines.
mhm,
Like I think that's the difference. I know, like, and again, I'm using like my music background to speak about it. Like sometimes I'm personally like almost frustrated by it, but I know that after being a musician for a long time and like playing in orchestras and playing jazz for a long time, I just like don't hear music like a cultural thing. Like I just hear more things in it, and I know that like I can't go back to being like regular listener. Like I just hear it from a different perspective, and it's just like not different at all. Like with designers, you just see more in the image, and that's that's just like not something. If there's anything that's like unclear about how AI will affect stuff, is really questioning how those skills will be developed when the manual aspect of it goes away. Like I don't think that someone can develop the same kind of like ear or like musical experience that I develop without playing an instrument every day for a long time. Even though we have like music generators that are very good, I don't think that using them consistently gives you the same kind of skill that I developed or my other musician's friend developed. So there's a big question on developing designer skills with AI that I really don't have answers to. But in terms of like the use case or the usage of designers, even with AI, I don't have any questions for it.
I completely agree. So for like a final philosophical question, because I'm curious because I think this comes up kind of often. And since I'm not a designer myself, I'm always curious about the opinions on it. So having shifted kind of from like human made to human judged, so to speak, for like AI, how do we make sure that designers feel ownership in the designs that they are creating with a tool?
Yeah, that's a huge question. So that gets into like the sort of generative versus generative conversation that we've had, like of the generative, like the parametric system, in which you really have all the ownership in some way because you created like a rule system. It's the same thing as like if I design the software is mine. It doesn't necessarily mean that the outputs of the software are mine, but like that's pretty easy. And then there's the question of like what it means for generative AI, meaning like diffusion models, for instance. So very, very quickly, diffusion models basically take noise, pure noise. Humans lie to them that that noise used to be some image, for instance, like a dog wearing a birthday hat or whatever. And then the diffusion model just cleans noise until it gets to what it can define as that original image. That and ownership in that world is, I think, gonna completely redefine how we think about, you know, the element of craft or like the element of ownership in craft. And I think it will redefine also like in everything, in like vibe coding, right? Like etc. There's just gonna be like a reorganization of where the ownership comes from. My bet would be that there's going to be a lot more focus on vision. And the more your vision is specific, the more you get to like be accredited for that ownership. While execution is just going to be a much smaller part of the of this. So also to elaborate on that. So for instance, my wife is a paper maker. She's an artist and a paper maker. So she makes paper by hand. And we talked about AI and other stuff in the way that it relates to her world. She's a very crafty person. She's like also doing ceramics and other stuff. And my bet is, like every other industrialization, it's just gonna kill a very large part of the middle. Unfortunately, if your work is just like sort of creating logos to like small businesses, it's gonna be really hard to keep that job. That being said, like if you're a fine artist that like, and your work is just like creating like super abstract stuff like on canvas, I think those things will
Yeah.
become much, much more valuable. because like those are gonna be like a lost art. Like you don't need the craft anymore to make them. The craft becomes um a very unique and a choice, right? So I think that that's going to be true for also for design, like handmade design and stuff like that will be probably then get like super overvalued, while a lot of the middle is going to be really undervalued, and the day-to-day work will be focused on vision work. So like designers can like execute really really quickly with tools that like we can't even really fully imagine, I guess. um, but it's gonna be more about vision than execution, and then there'll be the people who are focused on the execution. Like now you can get so many, like again, you can get plates, amazing ceramic plates that would be like reserved for like king for like nothing. But like if you go to some market in your city, you'll buy like some handmade plate for like, I don't know, $40 or something, and like that's normal, right? Like, but you don't have the person who like makes all the plates for the village anymore. Like that's just like gone, like a shoemaker and other stuff. So I think there's just gonna be like a middle that's skilled, and like the whole idea of like ownership is gonna be like kind of similarly in that, because again, like who makes a Nike shoe? I mean, I don't know,
We don't know anything.
but the vision is like completely outsourced from that process. And like who designs it, like we probably know, and it's a bunch of people, and it's a lot of vision work and like all that, like again, and who makes it, who knows.
Yeah.
I think we're probably gonna see something like that.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that shift. I also think that's kind of something that happens and has happened naturally through different aspects of industrialization. And I kind of see this as a parallel of like the very typical industrialization that we all kind of know. And yeah, I think that it's just kind of a changing of perspective of what is ownership of something, because if everyone's using this tool, there will still be a level of ownership in a way, but it won't be the same as it was before. It'll be something that's translated into a different way, like what you said is vision rather than the execution of it, because someone else or something else is doing the execution, whereas you are just you are the front man, whereas the middleman is now this tool. And I think that there will always be advancements, and I don't necessarily think that's a negative thing. I think it's just a shift.
Yeah, and we see like we see how designers and like other craftsmen, craftspeople like dealt with this in other industries. So like people sell like animation packs, and then people make use of these animation packs in their projects, right? Like who owns those animation packs? Like the artist, but they made it for other people to utilize so they can monetize a part of it, a part of their like vision and crafts, to contribute to others' vision and craft, right? Like that's sort of like an economy that didn't really exist in this way before we had like some advancements. Like music is currently like very built of like building blocks where like there's very few people, relatively a lot of people are making music, but very few people can like record it and play it on a really really high level. And those people, they monetize that skill by building sample packs, which are basically Legos for like other people who make music to take what they played and put it on a timeline and then sing over it. And that's fine. And we'll probably see something like that with AI too. I think we already do. People sell like, system prompts and other stuff. And the more the ecosystem will mature, the more we'll see people like find ways to monetize it and give up a little ownership to give other people like parts of the vision. And again, like vision work is just going to be the one thing that like nobody can take away from you.
Yeah.
And like they'll try, I'm sure people are trying already, but it's just like in the long run, it's just hard to believe that, an organization so like have, especially if you're an executive, have so many things on your mind, do you really also want to cut a bunch of people who like think about the vision of the brand all day, so you can like then have to think about that too? That just doesn't sound like a great
Yeah.
investment for like for bigger companies.
Yeah, I think this is just a very big shift, like an evolution in how we're working. And I think that obviously this has happened before and there's a lot of negative outcomes to it, but I think there's also a lot of positive outcomes of like how quickly we work and how efficiently we work. And there's a lot of things that we're not spending time on that was so tedious before, that kind of wasted time, so to speak. And I
Yeah.
think that is something that is so incredible about using these different tools now. So I think that it's just a lot of people are very apprehensive, but I think that we always have to look at the positives of what's becoming of AI, and it's clearly not going away. So we should just embrace it as much as we can without overly relying on it, because at this point in time, it's not necessarily everything. And I don't know how long or if ever that will happen.
Totally.
Well, I think this was a great point to wrap up because we're a little over time, but I thought this was very wonderful. And I really appreciate you going so in depth with this with me, not only like the philosophies, but all the intricacies of what you believe surrounding generative AI and generative design. Because I just think this is a really cool concept. I don't get to talk about it as in depth normally. So thank you so much.
Of course, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you so much, everyone, for watching or listening. We'd be nothing without you. So I appreciate you engaging, and I hope that you learned as much from this episode as I get to. So thank you so much, and have a lovely day.
You've been listening to Fully Managed, brought to you by Penji. Check out the show notes to learn more about today's guest, and to learn more about Penji, the human-first creative subscription service, head over to penji.co. And by the way, if you're still listening, it would mean the absolute world to us if you were to share this podcast with a friend, and of course, subscribe.